Hello and welcome to the Shutter Sports Podcast. I'm Katie LeBoutillier, and today I'm joined by our resident hockey knower, Clint Householder.
Hello and welcome, everybody.
Yeah, and today we're going to be discussing some CHL Trade Deadline, some junior hockey in general, and maybe a little playoff preview if we have it in us.
Yeah, lots to cover. The CHL Trade Deadline, it's kind of different than the NHL because you only get players for like 4 to 5 years, so no matter what, teams are selling every single year, and it's always pretty big, so there's a lot to cover today.
Yeah, and so how it's going to work, we'll start with the OHL. We definitely have the most to say on that piece, being from Ontario and all. And we'll run through kind of each team in the OHL, their ins and outs, and then we'll give you a little talk on the Q, not much happened there, and then we'll head to the dub. So getting started here, Clint, why don't you start us off with the East Division's best team, the Ottawa 67s.
Yeah, Ottawa, they kind of stunned everybody this year. Like, they were supposed to be a young, talented team. Like, they had Chitteroni, they had Amadovsky, but no one really expected them to be this good after how poor they were last year in the World Juniors that Dave Cameron had, and there's a lot of concerns around the team, but they have been unreal this year. Like, they are the top team in the East. I believe they have more games played than Brantford. I believe their points percentage is a little bit worse, but either way, being as close to a team that's as loaded as Brantford is very impressive. They did a fair bit at the deadline. They added David Bedkowski, who's a really good shutdown defenseman. He's drafted by Buffalo. They gave up a fair amount of picks for that. They brought in a pair of overagers in Sam McHugh and Nick Sema. After McHugh was on Brantford, the best team in the league, and then was upset about his lack of playing time. So then Ottawa was able to scoop him up for cheaper than what Brantford gave up to get him in the offseason. Then Nick Sema is a veteran who is also an overager, and he won the Memorial Cup for Saginaw a couple of years ago. So some good depth adds. They were forced to cut one of their overagers, Jack Dever, who ended up going elsewhere in Kingston. He was picked up on waivers, which I think it was a bit of an interesting move to add 2 overagers and then be forced to cut one. And then additionally, they signed Teddy Spitznagel, who started the year in Michigan and then wasn't getting much playing time, so then he's now joined Ottawa. The most interesting move that they made was probably trading away Nathan Amadovsky. They were able to recoup some assets, so they didn't actually give out too much, considering what the return they got for Amadovsky. So they should be a very good team for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and really quick on Ottawa, because it might be the team I know the most about. What's interesting about them is that they have so much local talent, and they kind of haven't, they went into the season not with a bunch of big names, but with a bunch of guys who played together in juniors and whatever growing up, and just kind of a very well-rounded team. They're one of the best defense in the league.
Yeah.
And they didn't go in with all this firepower. They just went in with a solid team, and they're very fun to watch that way.
Yeah, I watched them live in Brampton, and just the structure and the passing that they had, it was just unreal to watch. It looked like two different leagues when we were watching it. Every pass that they made seemed to connect, and they're so good in their own zone. They have 2 great goalies. They're going to be a tough out in the playoffs.
For sure. So then heading on to Brantford Bulldogs here. What do you have on them?
I mean, what did Brantford not do this year at the deadline and this year overall? They got the Hymans in running the show now, and they treat it like it's franchise mode on Chell. It's unreal. They traded out McHugh, who we talked about. They traded away Lane Gallacher, who's one of their top 08s. Yeah. They traded away Aiden O'Donnell, who was their top 08. They traded away another 08 in Luca Ladiposito, and they traded out I think it's a whopping 7 second-rounders and 4 third-rounders. That is insane. And they made more moves because they had to sell McHugh, so then they got seconds for him. They have no draft capital going forward. But when you load up your team as much as they did, it's hard to view it as not being worth it. It would be an absolute surprise to everyone around the league if they didn't win the championship. They added Jet Lachenko, who's a first-round pick, Ben Danford, who's a first-round pick, Zach Sandu, who's a great defensive defenseman, is an overager. Gabriel Frasca was a great depth add. They needed another center. They were actually, as good as they aren't good at the face-off dot, and that's a big add for them. And then they also added Charlie Paquette, who played with Jet Lachenko. And then they made a small addition for next year in Abe Barnett, who currently plays for the NTDP, but will be playing for them next year. So what do they not have? They have an all-star team. There's everyone knows how good Brantford is, so I won't spend too much time on them, but it would be a shock if they don't win at least the East and probably the whole league.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. I mean...
yeah, what do you say about them? They're an all-star team. I will say, though, their future is, so cooked, though. After this and everyone graduates, it'll be really interesting to see what they do next year. They need Malhotra to stay so they can trade him away.
Yeah, just a nice rebuild.
Yeah, 1 year rebuild. There we go.
All right, and then heading to Peterborough, they had the first pick last year, and, improved on last year, I guess.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird deadline for Peterborough. With how good Brantford is and how good Ottawa's been playing, and we knew Barrie was going to go in, I didn't expect too many teams in the East to actually go all in and buy a lot. But Peterborough, they did. They added Kieran Walton, he's been around the league lead in scoring the entire year. He's a sensational talent. He's like 6'6". He can move very well for his size and has a great shot. So it's a great addition. They also added Garrett Fraser and Brett Hammond to round out the depth. They did give up a fair amount. Like they gave up Cenk Ula, who was one of their top 08s, Blake Gowan, who's also one of their top 08s. One of their top 08, Colin Fitzgerald, the hometown kid, he requested out, reportedly. There's some speculation on whether he did or did not. Most people are saying that he did. So they had to trade him away, and they also traded away Caden Taylor, who also requested out. So they gave up a decent amount. I don't know if I would have gone in this year for them. I don't know if they did enough to actually really contend, but I understand with how poor they've been over the last 2 seasons to try and like win around this year and then build for the future with like Caden McGregor in them. I would have liked to see them add another defenseman. Andrew McNeil was reported to have wanted out from Kitchener, and he's from Peterborough. That's where he played his U16s. I think that would have been a great add. And that's kind of been their one weakness since the deadline that's really shown through, is that they need more actual OHL level defensemen. So I don't know. I think they'll be able to win around now, but I don't know if they're going that far in the playoffs.
Yeah. But like you're saying, just a step forward is good for them. And
yeah, like last year, I heard that like management thought they were going to be a decent team. They were going to push for like the 7 or the 8 seed, and they were like the worst team in the entire CHL. So last year was a definite disappointment. So I mean, when you're even this decent this year, it's great to go all in. And they also have the addition of Lucas Carmiras coming back from injury, which is pretty solid. Like that's another good depth add, and he'll be there next year as well. So they didn't like completely mortgage their future, but I would like to see them go all in next year.
Yeah. And then heading over to Kingston, what are the Frontenacs up to?
I mean, Kingston, they had a very good sell-off. Like they traded away Battaglia and Hopkins, who are two of their top players. They were kind of having down years. Like last year, both those players took great steps forward. Battaglia looked like one of the most like best scorers, best skaters in the entire OHL. But this year, his production fell off, as well as Hopkins. They were able to kind of build for the future. Their 2025 draft class was unreal. Kuhlman has looked great. Henderson's looked sensational, and even Snyder, who was a late round pick, has looked very good. And then in some samples, Ty Robar's looked pretty decent. So they had a great draft to build for the future in 2025. And now they added Alex Misiak to help play with those young guys. They brought in some talent. He was for Slovakia at the World Juniors, played alongside Tomas Pobazal. So they'll have some chemistry going. And they got a lot of picks. They got like 3 seconds, 3 thirds, a couple fourths. So yeah, really big fan of what Kingston did. I think they're going to be a really good team in the near future. Oh, and not to mention Alex McLean, who they got for Hopkins, which, I mean, it gets another year because he's an 08 opposed to an 07, so I think that's a good add for them.
Perth native.
So good to be close to home, too, exactly.
And then rounding off the East with the Oshawa Generals.
I mean, Oshawa, they had a good sell. They didn't have nearly as much as we thought, with Beckett Seneca being gross in the NHL right now. But they did still have Simon Wang, Ben Danford, and Zach Sandu to sell off, and they did pretty well there. The Danford and Sandu return was awesome. Like getting O'Donnell and DiPlacido and those guys and all the picks that they got was a great move. And then they also got Artem Frolov for Simon Wang, he's a decent 07 as well. And they lost almost the entirety of their defense core from last year, so it's good to have like a veteran presence back there. So you're not just throwing all your like 08s and 09s to the Wolves. And they've been a competitive team. Like as bad as they are record-wise, they lose a lot of close games. And they just played the Steelheads last night, and they look way better. So they're going to win some games. It'll be a shorter rebuild for them than I think most teams. They did really well. Perfect.
So before we move on to the Central, just your final thoughts on the East.
I mean, it's got to be Brantford's division to lose. I'd predict that Brantford takes over the 1 seed by the end of the year. Ottawa finishes in second, and then the rest of it just stays the same. Peterborough 3, Kingston 4, and then Oshawa 5.
Perfect. So moving on to Central here with the Barrie Colts in first by not a landslide, but a healthy amount there.
Yeah, I mean, they're the one clear like contender in this division. I don't know how great they are. They've been really good as of late, but I don't know if they have the top end talent to compete with like a Brantford or what some of the teams in the West did. They didn't have the most assets to spend at the deadline because they went all in last year. Like they had the quickest, we were talking about quick rebuilds. They had a quick rebuild. They were the 8 seed the year before and then traded away their first round pick from the year before, all that to go in last year. Didn't get the result they ended up wanting, but they're still a very competitive team this year. And they were too good to sell off. Like with Baudouin, with Aitchison, and with Hemming, like there aren't enough teams to go around to trade those guys to and get good returns. So they kind of had to go in. They have a great goalie. They added to their decor. They made more depth moves, bringing in Zabeski and Von Richter. And then they got Ben Wilmot from London, who's looked really good so far. So I think they're easily winning the Central Division. They'll probably go to the conference finals with how the schedule will go. I don't know if they have the top end talent to upset Brantford, but they play really responsible defensive hockey, and they could be a good trap team in the conference finals.
For sure. And then heading on to North Bay here.
North Bay didn't do the most. They just made one move, or two moves, I guess. One was early, and then one actually at the deadline. They brought in, or they traded away Iggy Potsy and a fourth-round pick for Caden Petrie, who's a Tampa Bay prospect, and he's been pretty decent there. And then at the actual deadline, they traded for Sebastian Gervais, who I sat behind at the Mem Cup, fun Clint householder fact, and Hayden Barch. So they made just a couple of depth adds. I thought that was going to be similar to what Peterborough would have done by just making like a couple small additions, try and win around this year, but really go in next year with their young core. So I think they played the deadline right, and I think they could. It'll be a tough out in the first round for whichever team plays them.
Yeah. All right, and then heading on to the Niagara Ice Dogs.
Man, I don't really understand the Ice Dogs. They refuse to pick a direction like ever. It's honestly kind of impressive. Before the deadline, they traded away Kevin He, who was their captain. He was arguably the best player on their team, at least through the history of this core. He was the leader of that team, and they traded him away. And to me, that signaled, okay, they're going to try and rebuild. They didn't even get a great return for him, but it was like, okay, maybe they're going to sell off Riley Patterson too, and then they're going to fully rebuild and start over. But then they didn't. They switched gears. They traded a second and a third, which is an overpay. Kitchener needed to get rid of Jakub Kromiak because he was not only an overager, but also an import. And they got 3 overagers with Matt Andonovski being returned from Ottawa. So they had to cut one. So everyone in the entire league knew that Kromiak was going to get dealt. And he's an import, which means not many teams have slots for him. And somehow Niagara still gave up a second and a third for him, which I think he's a great fit in Niagara, but price-wise, I don't know if that's a good trade. And they also traded for Simon Wang, which they did get a better value for. Like Frolov isn't that great. They didn't give up too many picks with him. It was like a third, a fourth, and a fifth, I believe. So some good adds to the blue line. I think they are a better team post-deadline than they were before, but it's just I wish they would have picked a direction, whether it was keep Kevin He and buy fully, or trade Kevin He and then sell Patterson too and reset.
As of right now, they're 4 points behind North Bay. Do you think they could challenge for that second spot in the Central? Or
I think they do. I think they'll end up getting it. The D-core is better, and then Ryan Robrick's been really hot as of late. Him and Riley Patterson have been unreal. They found great chemistry. They had a big win last night over Brantford. I think they're gaining steam. I think they'll end up finishing second in the Central there.
There you go. And then heading on to the Sudbury Wolves.
I mean, Sudbury, they had a great sell-off. They had some of the premier pieces in Nathan Villeneuve, in Kieran Walton. They also traded away Alex Ferran, who's one of their overagers, and they got a lot back. They got Cenk Ula from Peterborough, who's a decent 08. He is NCAA committed, so not sure how long he's going to stay in Sudbury, but it is notable that his younger brother, does play for Sudbury, so maybe that's a connection. They're able to convince him to stay longer. They got J.C. Lemieux, who is the biggest ad for me. This guy, he's draft eligible this year. He was a second-round pick by Windsor in 2024. I'm a huge J.C. Lemieux guy. I think this guy's going to go at least top 3 rounds in the NHL draft. I think he's a stud. He's been great since going to Sudbury. I think he's led them in scoring since getting there. They also added Carter Kostic early in the year, who's another talented guy. And then after the World Juniors, they signed Adam Nemitz. So it's not really a deadline addition, but they were able to bring over one of their top imports, and he's looked really good with Jan Hoven. So I think they end up being the team that sold and makes the playoffs. I think they'll be the 8th seed. If they weren't playing Brantford, I'd say they're kind of pesky. But I'm a big fan of what they did. They made the right steps for the future of this deadline.
Perfect. And then rounding out the Central here with the Brampton Steelheads.
I mean, Brampton. Oh my God, I'm gonna get fired. But they had a great deadline. They did an unreal job. They were one of the worst teams in the CHL or in the OHL this year. Their offense really struggled. They got hit so hit by the NCAA. Like, they lost Martone, they lost Ivan Kovic, which led them to trade away some of their other guys. They lost Aiden Lane too. So they got hit quite heavy, and they made the right decision. They weren't going to make if they made the playoffs, they weren't going to win a game against Brantford. They got crushed in their matchups. They made the right decision to sell off, and they did very well. They traded away Fibiger, Zabeski, Von Richter, Gabe Sherratt, and Josh Avery, which is 5 of their 6 leading scorers at the time. So they made a huge sell-off. But they got a bunch of picks back in return. They got 3 seconds, 5 thirds, and a couple more depth picks. And they also got some decent young players. Like Nathan Amadovsky, that's who picked him up from Ottawa. I really like that ad because Adam Valentini went to college. They didn't have an '08 first-round pick, so now they do. And then they got Carter Hicks, who was an '08 second-rounder. He does have an NCAA commitment, but he's looked pretty good in Brampton so far, and like it's his draft year, so we'll see if he stays later. Mason Roy, they picked up from Owen Sound, who was a former second-rounder who needed a change of scenery and now is going to get a lot more opportunity in Brampton. And they got some depth adds in Jackson Williams and Sam Black, so I think they did really good. It was the right decision, and then they're going to get a top pick this year and then actually start competing next year.
Nice, okay. And then we talked a little bit about it already, but as far as ending that division in that order goes, you're saying maybe Niagara over North Bay.
Yeah, I think Niagara surpasses North Bay, but that'd be the only movement I have in that division. Then the full Eastern Conference picture, I think that the teams to miss the playoffs are the Steelheads and the Generals.
I don't think those are crazy hot takes.
Yeah. Looking at the rosters post-deadline, it's probably pretty likely.
Perfect. So then we'll head over to the West here, and we'll start off with the Midwest leaders, Kitchener Rangers.
They had a busy deadline. They were the team that got Gabe Sherratt from Brampton, and then they followed it up with Jared Woolley and Sam O'Reilly from London after already scooping Dylan Edwards. They kind of cornered themselves by getting like too many overagers. They traded for Dylan Edwards to fill out their overager slot beside Chromiak, and then they ended up and Pridham as well. And then they had to trade away Chromiak because they got Andonovsky returned from Belleville. So then they did really good in that trade I mentioned. They got a great value for Chromiak, and then they were able to trade away a ton. I mean, the West, like, there are so many teams that are good in the West. It's hard to say who's going to come out. Like, Flint and Windsor are really good. Sioux added a lot. But it's hard not to really like what they're cooking there. They have a great coach. They have a loaded D-core now, 2 solid goaltenders, and they have a lot of very good two-way forwards up top. They did mortgage the future, like I was saying. They traded away their first-round pick from last year in Kane Barch, Jacob Zhu, who's one of their top 08s, Evan Hedrick, who was their first-round pick from last year, and traded away 4 seconds, 4 more thirds. They did give up a lot, but they did get back a second and third from Niagara, and then they also get a second-round comp pick for trading away Kane Barch. So, and they've proven they can find talent later in the round, so I'm not too concerned for their future, and they should be really, really good this year.
Perfect. And right behind them, we have the London Knights.
Yeah, London was the team to trade them Sam O'Reilly and Jared Woolley, which is, it's rare to see 2 Midwest Division rivals make a deal as big as that was. But it's easy to see why London did it. They got Barch, who I think will report to London next year. He's with the NTDP this year, but his dad played in the OHL for London. I don't think London makes this move if they don't think that he's going to go there. And if any team can afford to buy him out, it's gonna be London. Jacob Zhu is another great player. They also swapped their first-round pick in last year's draft, Logan Hari. He wasn't having the best year in London, as good as a lot of people expected him to. They got Ryan Brown back, who's looked very good for London so far. He was a 07 that was a first-rounder for the Sarnia Sting. And then they also got Jacob Vandeven and a couple third-round picks in a trade for Julian Brown, which I think they just really good asset management. They have a very good 08 core right now. I think they'll be competing as soon as next year. If they can get Waslin to stay, they're going to be competing for a very long time. It's the London Knights way.
Yeah, it seems like I feel like they lost, not everyone last year, they lost a lot of their talent, and they're still just...
Yeah, they do it the best. Like, the past 2 years, they go all in, they compete really hard, they win back-to-back OHL titles, win a Memorial Cup, and then this year they know, like, instead of holding on to O'Reilly and Woolley, like, let's sell off, get as much as we can, then build for the future.
Yeah.
Then also a lot of players just want to play there because of how well they develop, so that certainly helps their case.
For sure. And then moving on to Owen Sound here.
Owen Sound kind of had a puzzling deadline. They did some selling. They did a little bit of light buying. They're a very weird team because they are hit so heavily by the NCAA next year. Like Pearson Bowie is reportedly going. Tristan Delisle committed. Like they're losing a lot. So like with how good the West is, it probably didn't make sense to buy. But they didn't like fully sell either because they kept those guys instead of trying to get a return for them like this year. So they traded away Bedkowski, got a decent return. They traded away Carter George, which was the big one. There weren't too many teams that needed a goaltender, but they were able to get a very good return out of Sault Ste. Marie. Though they didn't get a player back, they got a lot of picks, which is very good for the future. They also traded away Mason Roy, who I mentioned. They did a swap of Michael Deck for Wesley Royston, which I think Deck was the better player. He looked really good when he played in Brampton last year, and he's been like a point per game in Erie so far. So I don't know if that's my favorite deal from them. I do know that some fans and some like people surrounding the team aren't the happiest with how their general manager handled the deadline. I don't think they're really going to compete this year. Just a very puzzling deadline from the Owen Sound attack.
And then you had to Guelph, who currently have identical records, basically. Very different deadlines, though.
Yeah, I mean, with Guelph winning the Mem Cup bid next year, they had to sell off. Like they instead of trying to compete as like a team like Peterborough, like this year where they're buying, they had to sell off. So they trade away Jet Lachenko, they trade away Charlie Paquette. They didn't get as good of a return as I would have thought for both those guys. They got 2 seconds for Paquette, which is like a decent return, but it's not anything too crazy. And then the Lachenko return was kind of disappointing. I do like Layden Gallacher as a player ad, but Oshawa arguably got better for Ben Danford and Sandu, which was surprising to me. There has been some rumors that maybe it's because it's a Part 2 trade next year with Guelph hosting the Mem Cup. Maybe they get him Mahotra for cheaper or Dravetsky or someone like that. But I do think they had a good year. They added Hopkins as well for next year. They should be pretty decent. I like the Josh Avery scoop. He played in Brampton. He looked like one of the more talented players on Brampton. I think he's a good depth add for next year. To judge the Guelph deadline, we're going to need to see what they do in the offseason and how they load up next year. So it's kind of TBD so far on their grade.
Perfect. And then finishing off the Midwest here with the Erie Otters.
They did a pretty good job selling, in my opinion. They didn't have the most assets to trade, at least like most top-end assets, but they traded a lot of their depth guys away. Like Gabe Praska was a good ad by Brantford. They sent him out. They sent Misiak to Kingston. They sent Fraser and Hammond to Peterborough, which we mentioned. Then they just had the Royston for deck swap, which I really like for them. They got back some promising 08s in Blake Gowan, who was taken decently highly by the Petes, and then Evan Hedrick. I was a huge fan of in his draft year. He was a first-round pick of Kitchener. He looked really good at the start for Erie, but then once they traded away their talent, his totals kind of fell off. But I am a believer in the talent. Then they also got a decent amount of picks, 3 seconds, 3/3. Pretty good deadline for what they had to trade.
Perfect. And then as far as standings go here, not too much movement.
Yeah, I don't suspect any movement in this in the division for the rest of the year. Like I think London stays 2, Kitchener's obviously going to win 1, and then I think the 3, 4, 5 just stays the same.
Perfect. We'll finish off the OHL with the West here, starting with Flint.
Flint and Windsor, they had some fun deadlines. They did a lot. I first need to apologize to the Flint Firebirds. I was not very high on them in the offseason. They lost a couple guys to NCAA, lost some graduations. I thought it was going to be more of a retool year, but Nate Aspinall has been unreal. Alex Kosov has been unreal. They've just been great all year long. Jamie Lombardi took the step that I was expecting him to take last year. He took that step forward this year. And then they got the players got rewarded. The GM went all in. They added Jacob Battaglia, who we talked about as one of the top scorers from last year. They were the team to add Kevin He, who I also think was one of the top players last year. They have a lot of speed to already go with the size that they had. They are a scary team in the playoffs. It'll be interesting to see who wins between them and Windsor. It would probably be one of those two as my pick to come out of the West. But they did a very good job with the deadline there.
Perfect. And then moving on to Windsor, what were they up to the deadline?
They were the team to get the big piece Nathan Villeneuve out of Sudbury. Mm-hmm. They did have to give up a haul. Like I talked about how high I am on J.C. Lemieux. They had to add him in there to get him to Windsor. But he's been very good since coming over. Alex Ferrand, those two play with a lot of physicality, which in the playoffs like that is going to be fun to watch. At the NHL draft in Vegas in 2024, I sat beside someone who played AAA in the Ottawa area, and he said that Nathan Villeneuve was like the toughest player he's ever faced. He was Nathan Villeneuve is a bully out there. So that was a great ad. And I think a very underrated ad that they also had is Jakob Fibiger from the Steelheads. I am a big Steelheads fan, so I admit that maybe there is some bias, but I think Fibiger is honestly maybe the most underrated defenseman in the entire league. Watching the Steelheads play with him and without him, like it's two different styles of hockey. The way that he controls the game, he can skate with the puck, he can control it. He plays in all aspects of the game. I know plus minus is a flawed stat, but he was like plus 12 or 13 on the Steelheads, and the next highest person was like 0 or plus. We had like one rookie who's a +2, and he's played like 7 games. So I know it's a bit of a flawed stat, but when it's that much of a difference, I think that certainly means something. So I think they did a very good job. They were already one of the top teams. I think that they end up winning the West. Spoiler.
Yeah. And on that Villeneuve piece too, we haven't really seen him playing in Sudbury on a highly competitive playoff team, and so I think getting to see that physicality in the playoffs will be very interesting.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to a Nathan, as a Kraken fan, I'm very much looking forward to a Nathan Villeneuve playoff run here.
Yeah. All right, and then heading to Sioux.
Sioux, they did a good job this deadline. Mm-hmm. It was interesting to see what they were going to do because they do have a lot of 07 talent, but with the new NCAA landscape, you kind of can't bank on those guys being back. So they added Colin Fitzgerald out of Peterborough. He was the one that reportedly requested out. And I'm a big fan of his talent. I thought he was really impressive at the OHL Cup. He's a great ad. They added Carter George in net. They had a big issue with letting in too many goals. I know the fans online were not happy with their goaltending situation. So getting the best goalie in the league is a sensational ad for them. And they also added Lucas Fisher from the Sarnia Sting, and they did very well in that trade. They didn't give up a whole lot, and they got an NHL drafted second-round pick. So that's a great ad. He hasn't been as good as I hoped or expected him to be so far, but I still respect the talent. Then they already have Chase Reed. They have Brady Martin. Like, they got some studs there. So I don't know. Like, the West Division specifically is really loaded, and it really could be a four-horse race between those three teams there, and then Kitchener.
Yeah. And then moving on to Saginaw, takes a bit of a step back here with these last two teams.
Yes, these teams are definitely a lot worse than the previous ones. I do like Saginaw. They're a fun team to watch. They got Klepov, they got Barabanov, they got Jilkin, Hanrahan. There's a lot to look forward to in the future. But they made the right moves. They didn't have too much to sell. They sold Sema, Barch, and Gervais from their winning cores. They got decent returns. They got a second, a couple thirds for those. Bodie Stewart is a nice depth add to give the young guys some talent to play with. They did get unlucky with Misa and Zane Perrick staying in the NHL. They didn't have the big pieces to deal. It was reported before the deadline that they might be getting them both back and trading them for a haul. I never fully believe those rumors, but I still would have loved to see them happen. But yeah, Saginaw, I think they make the playoffs, but I don't think they do anything in the playoffs, to be honest.
And then finishing off the OHL here with the Sarnia Sting.
Yeah, Sarnia, it's been a tough go of things for Sarnia this year. They fired their coach midway through the year. They basically cut bait with anybody over that's not an 08 or younger. They're keeping their 08 core. They like Diorio. They like Edwards. They traded for Logan Hawry. They traded with their 07 first-round pick for another 08 first-round pick in Logan Hawry. They traded away Case Kamzik for another 08 first-round pick in Tyler Challenger. I don't really know what to say about Sarnia. I don't think that they got enough top-end like offensive talent in their rebuild, and that they've kind of paid the price for that this year.
For sure. And then, I guess rounding off the OHL here, any thoughts on the...
Do we want to save our playoff predictions for the end, or do you want me to rip it here?
Save it for the end.
All right.
Then I guess we'll move on to the Q, and for this one, you can just rip through whatever happened, because there's not too much.
Yeah, the Q, not too much happened on a term of multiple teams buying, but I'm really looking forward to talking about this, because the Q, it is insane, the deadlines in the Q and the offseason in the Q. It was basically a two-horse race between the Blainville-Boisbriand Armada and the Chicoutimi Saguenayens. Those two teams went all in at the deadline. And when I say all in, I mean all in. Chicoutimi added Liam Lefebvre, who's a good 07, Lucas Beckman, who's the best goalie in the Q. He's a Sens prospect. He was unreal on Baie-Comeau, who was the worst team in the league. They got Thomas Lavoie, who's a great overager. They got Alexis Bernier, who is a Seattle Kraken second-round pick. And they got Maverick Lachance. And that was all at the deadline. That is an insane amount of work to get done. They trade away 4 firsts, 1 first-round pick in the import draft. They trade away a bunch of seconds as well. Just a crazy amount of movement. They are loaded. They already have Emile Guité and Maxime Massé, some NHL drafted talent. Alex Huang as well. They're a very, very good team. And then to counter them, Blainville-Boisbriand, who is the team that most people predicted to win the entire league this year in the offseason, they started off their offseason with some huge splashes. They traded for Vincent Collard, who was at the Mem Cup last year, who was very good. They traded for Spencer Gill, gave up 2 firsts and a second and a third for him. And he's a Philadelphia Flyers second-round pick. They traded away 3 firsts for Bill Zonin in the offseason. So that's 5 firsts that they traded away in the offseason. And then at the deadline, they also in the offseason traded for Jakub Milota, who is supposed to be their starter, but he's battled injury throughout the year. So because of that, they had to trade for a new starter in William Lassell, which they gave up 2 more first-round picks for. And then they also traded away their other import goalie and some of their younger roster players for Jan Golicic who was on the Gatineau Olympics. He is a Tampa Bay Lightning prospect. So they added a ton. And in the offseason and the deadline, they traded away 7 first-round picks, which as an OHL fan, like I'm so jealous that you can do that. The OHL, I don't know why, but for some reason you aren't allowed to trade away future first-round picks. So it kind of makes the deadline a lot more boring, where it's like you trade away your star player for 4 second-round picks, and it's like a little confusing. But in the queue, you can get first-round picks, and it is a lot of fun to watch.
Electric.
Yeah, it's electric. Like I was checking my phone at the deadline. I was like, how do these guys still have first-round picks? Like how is it possible that they trade away 5 in the offseason and still have 2 more to trade at the deadline? It's so much fun in the queue.
Yeah. I do not have the Q knowledge to rebuttal there. Like,
I mean, basically, it's going to be them or
Yeah.
Moncton. Moncton's been really good this year. I mean, with how much those teams went in, I sure hope one of Chicoutimi or Blainville-Boisbriand comes out of it. I would bet on Blainville-Boisbriand if they get healthy. Like, they have a ton of talent. They have Justin Carbonneau, Matteo Nobert, and then they have a guy who's going to be a first-round pick this year in Xavier Villeneuve. I would bet on them, but I think Chicoutimi is going to finish second, or he's going to give them a run for their money there.
Perfect. Heading on to the dub, we're not running through every team, are we? Or
no, we can just do kind of like some buyers and sellers if you want to
All right.
ask about those, or I can just kind of run away with it, whatever you prefer.
I just run away with it, Clint. You got it.
There was a lot of movement in the WHL. It was maybe the most interesting league to monitor with the NCAA landscape because the dub, like, it's so wide. There's so much area in the dub. There's so many different spots to play, like going from like Seattle and Washington all the way out east to Manitoba. So there's a lot of different teams that you can play for, and because of that, a lot of guys a lot of players will use their power to just go to the NCAA instead. So with that threat looming, like teams are like trading away guys that you would normally not expect to get traded. So it was a lot of fun to watch. A lot of teams did go all in. Like Edmonton did a lot. Prince Albert did a lot. Kelowna did a fair amount, but not as much as I expected for them as the Mem Cup hosts. I think the team who probably had the biggest deadline is Edmonton. They traded away Parker Alcos, who's NHL drafted. They traded away Joe Aginla, who was their first-round pick 2 years ago. In the 08 class. He's obviously Jerome Aginla's son. They traded away a decent amount, but they brought in a lot of talent. They got in Aaron Obabefo, who is a very good depth add from Vancouver. They brought in Carter Southern, who's a great overager defenseman. They brought another good overager defenseman in Austin Zemlak. Then they also added Jackson Footer, who's another great depth add. So they did a lot of moves. They had a lot of talent up top with Halinka playing so good. They're going to get Yeko back. Sawshin's been great this year. They had the World Junior surprise, Ethan McKenzie, and they have Blake Fiddlers. They're a very good team. They added a ton of depth. They don't really have like the superstar up top, but they are a very complete team, and they did a lot at this deadline to solidify that.
McKenzie really was a World Junior surprise. I loved him at the World Juniors.
Yeah, it's always great to see those I don't know, surprise stories of making the team. You know, everyone dreams of it as growing up as a kid. So to see someone like that make it,
and do that well, like
yeah, he played pretty well. He had some turnovers, but everyone had some turnovers in that team. So
he had some big goals too.
Yeah. If we want to keep on the World Junior train, the biggest World Junior player to get traded was Braden Coots, who I thought Kelowna would have gone all in for, seeing that they kind of need a center, they need another star. And most years, like the Mem Cup host team just goes all in, especially in the dub. Like the last time the dub hosted the Mem Cup, Kamloops traded 4 first-round picks for Olin Zellweger. So normally the team goes like crazy all in. They did more depth adds, and the team that did scoop up Braden Coots was Prince Albert. They've been very good this year. They have Daxton Rudolph, Riley Boychuk, a lot of good depth guys as well. So they've been very good. And they added Braden Coots. He's going to be their 1C. I think they have him playing on the third line, but it's like they have kind of like 3 first lines, so it's not like he's actually the third best center on the team. They did give up a fair amount. Ethan Bebo, and then a couple of prospects in Knox Burton and Trip Fisher, and a huge prospect in Diego Gutierrez, who's one of the top young prospects, but he is American, so there are some questions on whether he'll actually report. But I like his odds of reporting more to Seattle than to Prince Albert, so it makes sense for them to trade him there. They gave away 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and they also made a swap with Calgary. They traded away Ty Munier. Sorry for butchering the pronunciation. I'm going to butcher the next name too, and Brandon Grzinski. They made a swap for those guys. They added an 07, traded away an 08. So it just makes sense for kind of both teams there as Calgary's trying to get younger for next year and they're trying to win this year. So that was a good swap. I like that move for both sides.
I'm still reeling from that Zellweger pull.
Yeah,
mentioned. Man.
4 first-round picks is crazy. Like, you got traded for a guy who's 11 right now. Like, it's nuts. We can stick on the Seattle train because they had a bit of an interesting deadline. Before the deadline, during the World Juniors, it was reported they were going to trade away Braden Coots. So to me, that signaled that they're going to sell because they're trading away their best player on the team. You're probably going to be selling then, but they didn't. They right before during the World Juniors, they traded for Matthew Gard, who's a Flyers second-round pick. They didn't give up too much for him, so I kind of understand making that move. And after that move, I thought maybe they're going to keep buying, but then they did flip Coots. Then they immediately traded that return to get Cam Schmidt, who was the league's leading scorer. He's a little undersized playing for Vancouver, but he is one of the best scorers in the entire league. He's unreal, and I think their thought process is they're building for next year. I think they believe that Vancouver is either going to send Coots to the NHL or AHL next year, so they're going to lose him for nothing. They'd rather have a star scorer for next year. I don't know what their plan is with Radim Murtka, because I would assume that Buffalo does the same thing Vancouver does with him, so I don't know why they wouldn't try and swap him for like a younger player to build for next year. They did add Noah Kosick, who was one of the top picks in the WHL draft for his draft year as an 08. Then he had a slow year last year, and then got traded this year to Swift Current, where he was like a point per game. He did do a lot of his damage on the power play. He's another undersized player like Schmidt, so I like that ad, but he's committed to Michigan, so it's a weird move if he doesn't stay for next year. Like, if he doesn't stay for next year, it's a bad trade, but if he stays for next year, then they could be one of the top teams in the league, and it makes sense for that ad. So they had a very confusing deadline. That's what I was talking about at the start of this WHL part, is some teams trade away guys that you don't expect, or trade for guys you don't expect to see moved, and they were certainly a team that did that. I'll move on to the other probably most surprising move to me, and that was the Vancouver Giants trading for Mathis Preston. Spokane, they had a tough start to the year after going to the finals last year with Berkeley Catton and Andrew Cristall. They were due for some regression. They probably hoped to see Berkeley Catton back in a Chiefs uniform this season, but the Kraken had other plans. He's been playing pretty well as of late, and then they decided to just kind of retool, get a guy in Tyus Sparks back, he has better production this year than Preston does, but I think the Preston talent level is higher. He was the 3rd overall pick in his WHL draft year. But I do still like the return there that Spokane got. But man, I really like what Vancouver did. We were talking about Seattle adding for next year. Vancouver already has Ryan Lynn, who's going to be a first-round pick in this year's deadline, or this year's NHL draft. They traded for Mathis Preston, who's probably also going to be a first-round pick in this year's draft. They also added Joe Aginla, who was a first-round pick in the WHL draft. He's a talented 08, and he's going to have a lot bigger role for Vancouver than he was going to have in Edmonton. I think it's great for the draft stock of those players. Aginla was kind of buried in Edmonton. Now he's going to have a lot more opportunity in Vancouver. And then Preston, as great of talent as he was, he didn't have very much supporting cast at all around him in Spokane. So I think playing in Vancouver, he showcased very early on. He had a goal and assist in his first game with a highlight reel goal. Then he added an assist in his second game. Unfortunately, he did take a knee-on-knee hit, and he was forced to leave that game with help. And there's some question marks on when he's going to return. He's currently listed as week to week, which is promising for what it looked like happened on that play. I really hope he can come back, and I think if he plays maybe like the last quarter of the season in Vancouver, then he could really push his stock as a first-round pick. They also made another decent add in Will Sharp from Kelowna, who was a Kings 7th rounder. He's a decent. They needed a top pair defenseman. He's a decent top pair guy for next year to play alongside Ryan Lynn. So I like the moves that they made. I think they'll be a very fun team to watch next year. Well, while I talk about Will Sharp, I'll throw it to the Rockets, who traded him away. I said it before, but they didn't do as much as I thought they were going to at this deadline. I think there were a lot more holes on their roster than previous Mem Cup teams, at least the Tigers from last year, or London from last year, or even Moncton from last year, and Rimouski. They had more glaring holes. It sucks. Their biggest move was getting Peyton Kettles earlier in the year, and he went down with injury immediately for them, and maybe will come back for the playoffs, but that's a very tough loss, as they needed to help their decor, and then he got hurt immediately. They did fill that hole with Parker Alkos from the Oil Kings, who is a NHL drafted prospect from Vancouver, a decent two-way guy. They also got Ty Halliburton in the Will Sharp trade, who's a good overager. They had another great overager in Shane Smith from Lethbridge in a deal that also sent them the rights to Wojtek Cihas, who was maybe the top player at the World Juniors compared to expectations. He was very good for Czechia. He has 4 points in 5 games so far for Cologne, so he hasn't been like world breaking, but it's still a very good ad to play alongside Tomas Politin. I don't know. I was wanting more. I know I keep harping on that, but I don't know if they're the best team in the dub, and I certainly don't think they're going to be better than who comes out of the OHL, and maybe even which one of the 2 QMJHL teams comes out. So I would have liked to see them do more. Just a weird deadline from the Rockets. I'm not going to lie. An underrated deadline. They made some moves with the Rockets. Red Deer, I think, did a very good job selling and building for next year. They traded away Samuel Dronchak, who was like an 06 import, and they got back Yuri Kamas, who was one of the top defensemen for Czechia at the Hlinka Gretzky this summer. They really like that ad. They also got Cameron Kuzma and Cole Temple and Calder Varga, who will all be there next year. Solid depth pieces. They got a first-round pick for Chase Wutzke, who is their star goaltender, which I like that move there. They aren't going to win much this year, so you might as well move those assets into next year. They did very good. Medhat is one of the other top teams, and they didn't do very much at all, but I like the minor move that they did make. They were forced to trade away an overager in Mikhail Volotovsky, Mikhail Volotovsky. Then they made a good ad in Luke Cousins, who is an 06, and he's been very good this year for Lethbridge. I really like that ad to join Medhat. When you've won when you win 18 games in a row, do you really need to make a move? I don't blame them for going all in, especially after adding Molendyke last year.
Yeah.
They're probably the most impressive team in the entire CHL this year, considering what happened in the offseason. They lost Lindstrom, they lost Richie, they lost McKenna, who were all eligible to return but went to the NCAA, and they are still amongst the top teams in the Eastern Conference and won 18 games in a row, including some over the other top teams in the East. They've just been a wagon this year. Bryce Pickford's really stepped up. Jonas Wu has been very good as well. I'd be stunned if he doesn't get drafted this year. Very, very big fan of the Medhat Tigers this year.
Good for them.
Yeah. Everett is the top team out west. They didn't do too much, but they're a very confusing team. They'll just find guys and have them be good, and then when they're not good, they just trade them away again. It's really weird. Last year, they traded for Cole Temple, and he was very good. He was a former top pick in the 07 draft. He was very good, and then he was somehow not good this year. He was point per game last year and then had 8 points this year for them. So they traded him away for Luke Vluswick, who is a more defensive defenseman, which is more so what they need when they already have Landon DuPont. You already have Terrence Smith. They got a guy to help out on the back end. They also picked up Cade Rudig from the Kamloops Blazers. They gave up a first-round pick in that deal. It was kind of a confusing saga for Cade Rudig this year. He got traded from Portland to Kamloops in a buying move, and then Kamloops then traded him away once they got Harrison Brunick back. Interesting saga there. I'm a little surprised how Kamloops handled that, but they traded away a second and got back a first, so it's a good move, and they had a reliable defenseman for a couple months. I think they could have done more Kamloops at the deadline. They have Boehm, they have Lafreniere, they have Hurlbert, who's been unreal. And as good as those guys are, I know that they're young in 07s and 08s, but we know that Hurlbert's committed to college. We know that Boehm's committed to college. You don't know how long you're going to have those guys, so you might as well go in this year when those three are near the top of the scoring race. So I was a little confused by that, especially after they got back Brunick. But I guess they must have more inside information than I do. You know what I mean? Maybe if they have them back next year, then they could go for a huge run. So
yeah.
The last team I'll target out trade-wise is I like what Calgary did as well. They were one of those teams that were opportunistically buying for next year. I talked about the Ty Munier trade. I like that one. They also added Julian Mays from Regina, who was one of their top scorers, and they only gave up 2 third-round picks to get him, so that's a very good ad. I like the Blake Vanek ad from Wenatchee. And then they also got Jakob Seidel, who was an import that they got from Everett. And then earlier in the offseason, they bought the rights to Theo Stockselius, who is a Flames prospect, and he's NHL drafted. So if they can get him over next year, they could be a very decent team. Cale Dock's been very good for them. They've been a very underrated team, and I like what they're building for next year. And then lastly, Penticton didn't do too much, but they have also been kind of like Mad Hat, where they've been a wagon as of late. Jacob Kvasnika has been one of the best players in the entire CHL since the calendar flipped. He's been absolutely unreal. The Islanders got a steal in him. They're great. I understand not doing too much, not buying, not mortgaging the future, because unlike some other teams who had years to accumulate picks, they didn't, so they would have been trading away their own first-round picks and stuff like that. So it kind of makes sense to not go all in, especially when they're doing as well as they are. That's kind of all.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's the rest of the wrap here. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I went mute halfway through there. I was like, you know what? Keep going.
There's one thing I can do. It's yap about hockey. So
perfect. That's what the people are here for. All right. If that kind of wraps up the trade deadline discussion, let's move on to a quick little playoff preview here.
Yeah, I'll try and do like a conference finals prediction, I guess, for each league. The OHL, I would say it's Brantford beating Barrie in the Eastern Conference to advance to the finals. And then in the West, I'll say Windsor beating Kitchener to go to the finals. And then I think that Brantford beats Windsor in the finals. It's hard to pick against Brantford. I badly want to, because I don't want to just copy everybody. But man, they're an all-star team this year. So
we head to the queue now.
Yeah, I mean in the queue, Chicoutimi and Blainville-Boisbriand are easily the two top teams, and they're in opposite conferences, so they're most likely going to meet in the finals. Moncton could give Chicoutimi a run for their money. They've been very good as well. They have Caleb Denway. They have Tommy Blale, who's been great. Nico Turness has been one of the biggest surprises coming up from the Vietnal to play in the QMJHL. He's been very good. He's earned rightfully earned some representation in the draft, or recognition rather in the draft. But I think Chicoutimi and Blainville-Boisbriand end up making it to the finals, and I predict Blainville to come out on top.
All right. The look you gave me after.
I've called it that for years, and I forgot that its real name is just the NAHL, but
The Knoll.
The Knoll.
All right, and then we head to the Dub.
As much as like Mad Hat's been a wagon this year, I think they do make it to the conference finals. They've been pretty good head-to-head against Edmonton as of late. I know Edmonton's without Yeko, but I like Mad Hat there. And I'll say Mad Hat versus Prince Albert in the Eastern Conference Finals. And then in the Western Conference Finals, I think the West is a lot weaker, I think, than the East is, at least up top. I didn't think Kelowna did the most, but I think that they're going to play Everett in the conference finals, and I think that they're going to beat Everett in the conference finals. And then in the finals, I'll say it is Prince Albert versus Kelowna there, and I think Coots wins that one. I think Prince Albert wins the dub this year.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Any early Memorial Cup thoughts?
I'm gonna say that I'm gonna say whoever comes out of the OHL wins it.
Yeah.
If Brantford's so loaded, it's hard to not predict them to win. And if a team is able to beat Brantford, I have a hard time seeing them losing in the finals. I think just the OHL, if I'm doing a power rank of teams in the entire CHL, it's hard to judge Blainville-Boisbriand because they've been so injured. If they get everyone together, they're near the top. They'd probably be maybe number 2 for me. But with their injuries, it's hard to predict them to be higher. But I think the OHL has the most talent this year.
Perfect. Well, that wraps up our OHL discussion here. A little trade deadline talk, a little playoff preview, and even some M-Cup thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us on the Shutter Sports podcast. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you find your podcast. And don't be shy. Join the discussion on any platform at Shutter Sport Media. Unless that platform is X, then it's Shutter Sport M. Check out Household Hockey on Instagram and Twitter too. Shout out Clint for that. And until next time, I'm Katie LeBoutillier, joined by Clint Householder, and this has been the Shutter Sports podcast.